Hi everyone, and welcome to the first video in a series on blockchain development with Hyperledger and Hyperledger Composer. So this first video is going to take you through everything you need to do to install the tools and get everything ready on a local environment, which will run on Docker. And then that will let you to actually start development, start Hyperledger Fabric and the Composer environment, and also the playground tools, which we'll show you in this video. In follow-up videos, then the next one we'll talk about the actual development, some of the architecture, key points that you'll need to understand a little bit, and take it through the code and those sorts of things, and actually doing development. And then we'll eventually get to in the follow-on video installing on a Kubernetes cloud environment. So something similar to what you might actually deploy to in a if you were going to do this and run this in a production environment. So with this first one, we'll start on setting everything up locally. You'll want to bookmark the Hyperledger Composer documentation. I'll put the link to it in the information underneath the video here. So copy that, bookmark it. I find it very useful going through development. There's some really good tutorials, and I use that as a point of reference a lot of times just during development. So definitely go through the tutorials if you haven't gone through them yet. The developer tutorial is excellent, but you can also just, like I said, use it as a point of reference when you're doing your actual development. So there's some prereqs that you're going to need to install. I'm on a Mac, so I'll look at we'll look at the kind of the different prereqs and things that you'll need to actually start development. First of all, I've done node development in the past, so I already have a node environment on my machine. So because of that, I'll have to install NVM, the node version manager. Without doing that, Composer really just won't run correctly. So go ahead and do that. The docs here are very straightforward and very easy to follow. It does say install Apple Xcode. I have that already on my machine, so I didn't do that, but I haven't really found a need to use it yet. I use instead Visual Studio Code, and they also have directions for that as well. So I think just any kind of IDE is going to be a good one that you can use. So go through some of the different steps that they show you in the documentation here. The key one that you're going to really need to know after you've downloaded and installed NVM is the NVM use LTS. So you'll do that. You'll see if I open up a new shell environment, I have Composer already installed, but if I try to run it, it's not found. So every time you open up a new shell like this, you need to do NVM use LTS. So get very familiar with that, write it down, put it in some other steps so you know it, and then you see if I run Composer, it actually runs and it finds it and everything's good. So I definitely need to do that. So we'll go ahead, continue on, install Docker. Again, I found this as a very simple install. After you've installed Docker, here you get a little Docker icon, and it'll show Docker is running. Pretty much all you really need to do. Very straightforward. Install Visual Studio Code. Again, very straightforward. There's some extensions for Hyperledger that go with Visual Studio Code. All this is, again, very straightforward, to do. That's kind of the prereqs to the install. So click on here, we actually get a development environment, install, kind of instructions. Now we start getting the actual development environment installed, obviously. So we'll install the tools. You'll need Composer. These are all, notice these are all NPM, so no package manager, so these are all node-based tools. We're installing Composer, the REST server. I definitely use both of these all the time when I'm doing development. Definitely install these. I would install all these just because you'll need them to go through the tutorial, but you may not need them every day in your actual development. Yo is interesting. Yo is a node tool. It's a generator. So you use it in the tutorials to generate like a skeleton, blockchain, Hyperledger skeleton project that you can then start changing and doing your development with. I'll show you a different method for that I kind of like a little better, that gives me a little bit more starter code in the next video when we talk about the playground. But Yo can be used to generate a starter skeleton. It can also be used, you do in the tutorial, to generate like a UI, which is based on Angular. So you can generate an Angular UI for your business network, and that's kind of a neat tool to see, to kind of put a UI in front of it, just to interact a little bit differently with the network that you create and your code you create, rather than just using the REST server. I really like the REST server. The REST server is very powerful, and I'll show you that in detail as well when we do our development video. And finally, install the playground. The playground is very, it may have a name like playground, and you're thinking that, how useful is this? I do find it useful, especially when I'm starting projects, and then I don't use it too much afterwards. So I think it's good to start with that, and then move on from that and build onto that, and you'll kind of see how you'll see more about that kind of the next video a little bit as well. So you set up your development environment if you haven't done that already. The IDE you're going to use. Install Hyperledger Fabric. So this is kind of the meat of what you want to be able to do here. You download all the scripts. So you're going to make a directory, and they reference it as Fabric Tools. So make a directory called Fabric Tools. Download all the scripts into there. Unzip the scripts, and then you're going to run download Fabric shell script, and that's going to download everything that you need from from a Docker kind of standpoint, all the Docker images. And those, what that actually looks like, I can show you. You're going to download, pretty much all these, and you can see that some of these are pretty large. They're more than a gig. So definitely make sure you have a few gig available on your machine when you do that. And it'll take a while to download, so we're obviously not going to do it. Here you can download it. It's pretty straightforward. Never really had any issues with doing that. You'll see a couple different things here. These are, I'll explain more in the follow-on video. When you actually create and deploy a business network, it creates another image, which is a peer node. So these are peer nodes for other development that I've done. When you run the scripts, this is the base environment that you need. Database, the peers, the orderer, certificate authority, the base operating system, all that stuff. So you need all those, and then you'll be set and ready to go. So we do that, and then we want to be able to actually start our development environment, obviously. So you're starting from scratch. You want to do a start Fabric and create the peer admin card. I'll explain what those are later. And then you'll see Composer Playground. So that's how you bring that up. I do want to talk about the kind of the tool script real quickly and give you a little bit of a hint here, and kind of a cool little trick that I found, and should save you some aggravation maybe later. If you open up the Fabric scripts directory, you'll see a start and stop Fabric here. This actually just calls ones that are in nesting directories here. So there's actually a Fabric scripts, and then if you go into Fabric, Hyperledger Fabric version 1, you'll see a start and stop Fabric script there. You also see this restart. Now you guys don't have that yet, and I'll show you what you need to do to create that. So if we take a look at the scripts and you do let's start with stopping. So let's assume it was running, and we'll do a stop. The stop just does what you would normally think. It brings down, calls your Docker Compose YAML, brings down any Docker images that are running. Okay, that's great. Start, on the other hand, does a few different things. It actually does a down and then up. So it actually brings everything down, which if you do that, you're going to lose your connections along the way when you're doing your development with Hyperledger Fabric, and it's going to be a little bit of a frustration, I would say, and a little bit of a pain for you, because I think of this as, I know when I'm doing development, I may not I may not do all my development, in one day, right? You're going to do a little bit of development, maybe shut everything down, do a stop, and then you want to be able to maybe start it up again tomorrow where you left off. You don't want to start it off from scratch. And if you do a start fabric, it kind of is like you're starting it from scratch because you're bringing everything down and then you're bringing it up again. So what I ended up doing was I made a copy of this stop fabric script, and you'll see it here, called Restart Fabric. And all this does is just do the exact same thing, look at the environment and everything, call Docker compose YAML. Instead of issuing a stop, I issue a start. And what that does is save my environment from where I was and where I left off. So now I can kind of continue on, and I don't lose any connections with any of my network cards or any of that kind of stuff. So very important. I think it'll save you a lot of time and some frustration, and maybe in the future to go ahead and take a look at that and actually do that. So hopefully that helped a little bit, gave you a little bit of a hint on where we're kind of going with these videos. If you look at this, I'm in the directory already we need to be in, and if I go ahead, I'll show you nothing is running yet. I go ahead and call my restart fabric script here. Should start everything for me. And there you go. It starts up pretty fast. It's my all my Hyperledger tools that I need to actually do development. And if I run the playground, this is a good way just to kind of test it to make sure that everything is running, in fact. And here you go, it launches the playground for me, which I installed, and we're ready to go and start our development. So in the next video, we'll go ahead and do that. Thanks.